Guys, I cannot express to you the shock that I felt when I saw the news that came out of South Korea today. This image you're seeing right here will go down as one of the most iconic images in recent South Korean politics, but for all the wrong reasons. What just happened is as crazy as the martial law order from just a few days ago. I'd even argue it's crazier. We have to talk about it, so let's do this. So a few days ago, the South Korean president decided to impose martial law without any announcements prior at 10:30 p.m. He ordered the military to block off the National Assembly because it was the only way to lift the martial law. He tried his best to do a full military mobilization with even helicopters flying above. But thanks to many protesters coming out very late at night, going up against the military, and 190 legislators from the National Assembly showing up to vote, the martial law was lifted. What did the president have to say about this? Well, he was very sorry for causing anxiety with his declaration of martial law. He basically said, whoopsies, and left. Like, what? This wasn't something he could just get away with, though. This was the first instance of martial law in over 40 years. And even worse, once it was lifted, it turned out that he had ordered the arrest of the opposing party leader, as well as his own party leader, the dude leading his own party in the National Assembly. Like, things were not making any sense. He pretty much wanted everyone arrested. And I mean, to many, this did sound like a coup, an attempt at taking absolute power. But get this, the next day, the president's political party held an emergency meeting to discuss this, to try to understand the logic behind this martial law that they had never heard of until its announcement. And they actually had this theory that the reason he declared martial law was because he was lonely and needed a friend to talk to. Dude, what are South Korean politics? Like, what are we doing here? What is this? Now, even though he wanted to arrest his own party leader, his apology contained a contradictory piece of information that he was trying to convey to the South Korean people. He said, "I'll leave it up to my party to take steps to stabilize the political situation in the future, including the issue of my term in office," promising there would be no second attempt to impose martial law. So zero intention of stepping down as president, instead saying, you know what, my party's gonna handle it, just forget I exist. But it doesn't work that way. He can just wake up 6 months or 12 months from now and decide, you know what, I'm president again, obey me. So it's no surprise that the opposing party wanted to impeach him as soon as possible, expecting his own party to turn on him so that they can vote for the impeachment as well. And while the president promised that he wasn't going to impose martial law for a second time, some legislators were not going to take any risk like this one from the opposing party, literally sleeping in the National Assembly so he doesn't get caught by surprise like the first time. It's crazy. I asked the question again, what the hell are South Korean politics? Like, what is this? Regardless of the fact that a legislator was literally sleeping in the National Assembly, December 7th had finally arrived. This was it. The legislators were about to meet up to vote to impeach the president. And even though the weather was 0 degrees Celsius, thousands of people had shown up to stand in front of the National Assembly to show their support for the impeachment of the president. Look at this crazy amount of people. It's staggering. It was clear. This is what South Koreans wanted. But unfortunately for them, it wasn't that simple. I spoke about this in my previous video. This is how the National Assembly is divided in South Korea in terms of parties. There are 300 seats total. So the red is the People Power Party. This is the party of the president. The blue, which is the majority, is the Democratic Party. This is the opposing party who has tried to impeach the president over 22 times, even before the martial law coup. And the other colors you see here are the other parties that were voted in, sometimes having 1 seat or 3 seats, for example. The Democratic Party had an agreement with those smaller parties. They were going to be allies and vote together on the impeachment of the president. But there was one problem. There were only 192 members. In order for a bill to pass, 2/3 of the people present in the National Assembly need to vote yes. Impeachment, though, is an exception where it needs a minimum of 200, period. Doesn't matter if you show up or not. This meant that the Democratic Party, as well as the smaller parties, needed to rely on a few backstabbing votes in the People Power Party to go against their own president in order to achieve the 200 vote threshold to impeach him. In theory, this should be simple because the president wanted to arrest his own party leader. But of course, nothing is ever simple in politics. The party leader of the People Power Party, Han Dong-hoon, who the president wanted arrested during the martial law order, had said that yes, the president is hopeless, he needs to step down, but didn't quite want to impeach him. He actually had a different idea. He wanted to strip all power from the president and get the prime minister to do his duties instead. This is obviously something unprecedented and something that the opposing party has called illegal, crazy. But the logic behind such a proposition is something we've seen over and over again in many countries throughout history. Han Dong-hoon and the People Power Party did not want to give up, well, their power. They're the governing party until 2027, until the president's current term ends. And they simply don't want to give this up, even though, right, this dude was about to be arrested if the martial law wasn't stopped by the opposing party. He is still clinging on to power. This, of course, worried the Democratic Party that this vote wasn't going to pass, that he was going to order all his legislators to not show up to the vote. So they came up with a plan. The Democratic Party, instead of just voting on the bill of impeachment, was going to vote on another bill first. The prosecution of the First Lady of South Korea, the president's wife. Look, she's been in many scandals, okay? In the beginning of the year, she had a scandal where she had accepted a Dior bag from a pastor, which was pretty much bribery, according to the Democratic Party. But more recently, the Democratic Party alleges that she was involved in stock manipulation and election nomination interference. Some very serious level stuff. And unlike the whole Dior bag case where they wanted to assign 3 prosecutors, they wanted to assign 30 different prosecutors on this case. So obviously, if something like this passes, the People Power Party, let's just call them PPP from now on, is in big trouble. And their hopes and dreams of clinging on to power, even though their president did something extremely irresponsible, vanish. They had to show up and vote no on this bill. What the Democratic Party was going to do is that as soon as they voted no on this bill, they would immediately start the vote on the second bill, which was the impeachment of the president, forcing them to be there. This obviously sounds like a genius 5D chess move on paper, but was it actually going to work? It remained to be seen. But one thing was for certain, many South Koreans were on the streets. And not just any South Koreans, right? You had all sorts of South Koreans, like straight up idols who usually remain apolitical, show up to protest this. You had people from all sorts of economic backgrounds, all sorts of different neighborhoods, all coming to protest in their own way. I mean, just look at this. Seriously, look at this. Someone recreated the head of the president and is slapping it with a hammer. Some dude just showed up with a baguette, like just a straight up baguette. Again, what is South Korea? These protests even spread to Japan. It wasn't just a South Korean thing. This had spread worldwide. Everyone was hoping that a leader like this gets held accountable, not just for the sake of the South Korean people, but for the sake of their democratic systems. A lot was riding on this, and it was almost time. As expected by the Democratic Party and its allies, the PPP had shown up because of the first bill against the First Lady. Okay, everyone was in place. There were no absentees. But as I mentioned earlier, this plan looked good on paper. Reality was about to be very different. The vote to prosecute the First Lady was actually extremely close, only missing 2 votes to reach 200, which meant that 6 different legislators from the PPP party, from the president's own party, voted to prosecute the First Lady. And yes, while the vote failed, it was expected. However, it gave people hope. Okay, like if there's 6 people going up against the president already, they must vote to impeach him, right? Well, as you can see from this image, as soon as the first vote ended, the second vote started, and every single PPP member except for 3 all stood up and left the room. This is an image of the National Assembly hallway, and here you can see some of the PPP legislators that stood up and left being shouted at in protest by the people there. They were in disbelief over what had just happened. The Democratic Party didn't just let this slide. They all stood up and started calling each individual name of the PPP legislators that had decided to leave the National Assembly. Watch.
권영세 의원, 권영진 의원, 김건 의원, 김기웅 의원.
They were not going to let them go away without shaming them, each and every single one of them. But even after doing so, none of them came back, right? The vote had officially failed. And the Democratic Party legislators, as well as their allies, had also begun to leave the National Assembly. When the news of the impeachment failing started circulating, this was the reaction of the thousands of protesters sitting in freezing weather outside. Watch.
대통령 윤석열 탄핵 소추안을 상정합니다.
Obviously, they weren't happy. Look, the reality is that, according to Gallup Korea, the president's approval rating has plummeted down to 13%, dude. That's insane. That means that almost 9 out of 10 South Koreans are going to tell you that they want this president out, impeached, replaced. This means that, objectively speaking, the legislators not voting to impeach him are going directly against what the South Korean people want. The opposing party was not going to let this slide. On the official National Assembly Twitter account, here's what they had to say in a statement posted recently. They said, "It is very regrettable that a vote was not even held on such an important national issue." They said the failure to vote on this issue means that the democratic procedure for judging whether something is good or not failed. I'm paraphrasing since this translation is really bad. And then they said, "On behalf of the National Assembly, I apologize to the people." Shortly afterwards, the floor leader of the PPP resigned. He's being accused of having colluded with the president in declaring martial law. He was aware of it, unlike most other people. The Democratic Party is not going to let this go away. They're already planning the next vote to impeach the president, starting as early as next week. And many South Koreans are not giving up anytime soon because this had actually happened back in 2016. Back then, the first female South Korean president was accused of corruption and extortion. And even though the proof was on the table, it was well known, it took weeks to impeach her, multiple votes, and millions of protesters showing up every single week to the National Assembly. Many are hoping that with enough protest, the same thing happens with this president, and that it takes, of course, less time. If the president's impeached, there will be a new election that will be held within 60 days to find a new president. And I think it's safe to say that if there is an election, the PPP will have a very hard time winning. Thanks so much for watching the video till the end, guys, and thank you so much for your recent support. This is yet again another all-nighter, and I'll probably update you if the impeachment goes through. Otherwise, expect other videos coming, well, pretty damn soon. Thanks so much. I love you so much. Mwah.